My name is Ethan Walker. I'm 32 years old and the CEO of Walker Innovation Solutions. Growing up, I always dreamed of joining Mitchell Construction, the company my grandfather built from nothing. Instead, my Uncle Gerald looked me straight in the eye and said, "You're not qualified to work here, family or not." That rejection changed everything. 5 years later, I sat across from him at a different table, as his company's largest client, with the power to cancel our $60 million contract. Funny how life works out. Before I tell you how I turned the tables on my family's rejection, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, and hit that subscribe button if you believe in karma. I can still remember the smell of sawdust and coffee that filled the air at Mitchell Construction Company when I was a kid. Every Saturday morning, my dad would take me to the office, and I'd run through the hallways, peeking into meeting rooms where blueprints covered tables and men in hard hats discussed their next big project. The company was my grandfather's legacy, his American dream come true. Samuel Mitchell, my grandfather, started the business in 1965 with nothing but a pickup truck, a toolbox, and an unshakable work ethic. He began with small residential jobs, fixing porches and building garden sheds. By the time I was born, Mitchell Construction had become one of the most respected commercial builders in the state. Grandpa Sam, as I called him, had calloused hands and a soft heart. He would sit me on his knee and tell me stories about building skyscrapers, saying that one day I might help run the company. My father, Robert Mitchell, joined as vice president under my grandfather. Dad was brilliant with numbers and planning, the perfect complement to Grandpa Sam's people skills and vision. They made an incredible team, and the company thrived under their leadership. Dad married my mom, Elizabeth Walker, and I came along a few years later, carrying my mom's surname because, as she liked to joke, there were already too many Mitchells in the family. When Grandpa Sam turned 70, he decided it was time to step back. The logical successor should have been my father, who had been with the company for 20 years at that point. But my Uncle Gerald, Grandpa's younger son, had other ideas. Through a series of boardroom maneuvers and leveraging his relationship with key investors, Gerald positioned himself to take over as CEO when Grandpa retired. Dad was devastated but kept his position as VP, though his influence gradually diminished. From the age of 8, all I wanted was to work for Mitchell Construction. I would draw building designs in my notebooks at school and read books about architecture and engineering instead of comics. My bedroom walls weren't covered with posters of bands or sports stars but with blueprints Dad would bring home for me. When it came time for college, I strategically chose my path. I earned a business degree with a focus on construction management, then pursued an MBA with a concentration in sustainable development. Every summer, I interned at different construction companies to gain experience from various angles of the industry. I deliberately avoided interning at Mitchell, wanting to earn my place through merit rather than nepotism. While I was building my resume, family dynamics were shifting at Mitchell Construction. Uncle Gerald had a son, Trevor, who was being groomed for leadership despite his mediocre performance. Trevor and I were the same age, but while I was graduating with honors, he was barely passing his classes at a college chosen for its party reputation rather than academic rigor. Still, Gerald made sure Trevor had a management position waiting for him. My mother could see what was happening. "Ethan," she would tell me during our late-night talks, "your uncle is creating a dynasty, not running a business. Don't pin all your hopes on Mitchell Construction." But I couldn't let go of the dream. This was my family's legacy, and I had prepared my entire life to be part of it. As I worked through my MBA program, I watched from the sidelines as Gerald systematically pushed my father further away from key decisions. Dad would come home frustrated, his suggestions ignored, his experience dismissed. At family gatherings, the tension was palpable. Grandpa Sam, now in semi-retirement, seemed oblivious to the power struggles, or perhaps he simply chose not to intervene. During my final year of graduate school, I took an internship with Reynolds Construction, one of Mitchell's main competitors. I wanted to understand how other successful companies operated, to bring fresh perspectives back to Mitchell. I excelled during this internship, even helping Reynolds secure a major contract through an innovative approach to project management that saved them millions in potential overruns. Mr. Reynolds himself offered me a full-time position upon graduation, but I politely declined. My heart was set on Mitchell Construction. I believed that with my education, external experience, and fresh ideas, I could help modernize the company my grandfather built and restore my father's influence. I envisioned working alongside Dad, learning from his experience while bringing new technologies and processes to the table. The week before my graduation ceremony, I called Uncle Gerald to discuss potential positions. The conversation was brief and cool. "Submit your application through HR like everyone else," he said. "We don't play favorites here." I was actually relieved. This was my chance to prove myself on merit alone. Little did I know that this conversation marked the beginning of the end of my family business dreams, and the start of something I never could have imagined. 2 weeks after graduation, dressed in my best suit and armed with a portfolio of projects and ideas, I walked into Mitchell Construction for my interview. The receptionist, Janice, who had known me since I was in diapers, winked as she announced my arrival. "Good luck, Ethan," she whispered. "We need fresh blood around here." I was directed to the main conference room where Uncle Gerald sat at the head of the table, flanked by Patricia Coleman, the HR director, and to my surprise, my cousin Trevor. Trevor had no role in hiring decisions and no HR experience whatsoever. His presence immediately set off alarm bells, but I maintained my composure and confidence. "Ethan," Uncle Gerald said without standing to shake my hand, "let's see if your fancy degrees translate to anything useful in the real world." For the next hour, I fielded questions that seemed deliberately designed to trip me up. While Patricia asked standard interview questions about my experience and skills, Gerald interrupted with scenarios that had nothing to do with the position I was applying for. "What would you do if a client demanded a complete redesign 2 months into construction?" he asked. I outlined a response involving client communication, contract clauses, and compromise solutions that would satisfy the client while protecting the company's interests. Before I could finish, Gerald cut me off. "Theoretical answers from theoretical education," he scoffed. "Trevor, tell Ethan what you did when the Westlake project had this exact issue last year." Trevor straightened in his chair, clearing his throat. "I told them they'd have to pay triple for any changes. They backed down immediately." He smirked, looking to his father for approval. Gerald nodded proudly, though I knew from Dad that the Westlake project had gone significantly over budget due to poor initial planning, precisely because Trevor had antagonized the client rather than working with them. As the interview progressed, the bias became increasingly obvious. Patricia looked uncomfortable, avoiding eye contact with me as Gerald dismissed each of my answers and achievements. When I mentioned my success at Reynolds Construction, Gerald's face darkened. "Sharing our industry knowledge with competitors, were you?" he accused. "Not at all," I responded calmly. "I was gaining experience and perspectives that could benefit Mitchell Construction." The final blow came when I presented my portfolio, which included innovative approaches to integrating technology into traditional construction processes, something Mitchell had fallen behind on according to industry reports. Gerald barely glanced at it before pushing it aside. "We've been successful for over 50 years without these Silicon Valley gimmicks," he said. "Mitchell Construction builds with concrete and steel, not apps and gadgets." After an hour that felt like an eternity, Gerald stood abruptly. "Thank you for coming in, Ethan. We'll be in touch." I knew in that moment I wouldn't get the job, but I still wasn't prepared for what happened next. As I gathered my materials, Gerald added, "Actually, let me be clear so there are no misunderstandings. You're not qualified to work here, family or not. Mitchell Construction needs proven industry leaders, not academic theorists." Trevor had the audacity to nod in agreement, despite having none of my qualifications or experience. Patricia looked mortified but remained silent. As I walked out, head held high despite the humiliation burning in my chest, I heard Gerald tell Trevor, "That's how you handle entitlement. Walker blood isn't Mitchell blood." Remember that. The following week, I learned that Mitchell Construction had hired 2 new project managers, both with significantly less experience and education than me. One was Trevor's fraternity brother. The other was the son of one of Gerald's golf buddies. When I confronted my father about the rejection, we sat in his home office, the walls lined with awards and photos from his years at Mitchell Construction. He looked tired, older than his years. "I'm sorry, Ethan," he said, his voice heavy with defeat. "Gerald has complete control now. The board follows his lead, and he's made it clear that he wants his own people, his own legacy." "But what about Grandpa's legacy?" I demanded. "What about your contributions? 30 years of your life devoted to that company, and he treats your son like an outsider?" Dad placed his hand on my shoulder. "Business isn't always fair, son. Neither is family. Sometimes they're equally cruel." That weekend, we had our monthly family dinner at Grandpa Sam's house. I almost didn't go, but Mom insisted it would look worse if I skipped it. The evening was excruciating. Uncle Gerald dominated the conversation, announcing that Trevor was being promoted to Director of Business Development, a position created specifically for him. Grandpa Sam beamed with pride, oblivious to the politics behind the promotion. "The future of Mitchell Construction is looking bright," he declared, raising his glass. "To the next generation." I felt my father tense beside me. Mom squeezed my hand under the table. As everyone clinked glasses, I made a decision. If Mitchell Construction didn't want what I had to offer, I would find someone who did. Or better yet, create something of my own. The rejection had planted a seed of resentment, but also one of determination. Walking away from that dinner, I had no idea that this painful moment would eventually lead to the most satisfying confrontation of my life. The months following my rejection from Mitchell Construction were the darkest of my life. I fell into a depression that I tried to hide from my parents. Each morning, I'd leave the apartment I'd rented in anticipation of my new job, pretending to go to interviews or networking events. Instead, I'd sit in coffee shops, scrolling through job listings that couldn't compete with the dream I'd lost. The construction industry in our region was tightly knit. Word had somehow spread that Gerald Mitchell had deemed his own nephew unqualified, creating an invisible barrier to other major firms. Several promising interviews ended with vague excuses about not being the right fit. I began to wonder if my uncle's influence was more far-reaching than I'd realized. One rainy afternoon, as I nursed a cold coffee in the back corner of a cafe near my old university, I heard someone call my name. It was Dr. Marcus Hayes, my former professor of business innovation. "Ethan Walker," he said, sliding into the chair across from me. "I expected to see your name making waves by now. What's happening?" Something about his genuine concern broke through my carefully constructed facade. I found myself telling him everything, from the rigged interview to the subsequent industry cold shoulder. Dr. Hayes listened without interruption, his expression growing increasingly thoughtful. When I finished, he leaned forward. "Ethan, do you know what I see when I look at you? Not a rejected applicant, but a solution provider waiting to happen. The construction industry is one of the least disrupted by technology. It's ripe for innovation, and you understand both worlds." That conversation became the first of many. Dr. Hayes became my mentor, helping me identify a specific gap in the market: the integration of smart technology into commercial construction. Traditional construction companies like Mitchell were building the same way they had for decades, while clients increasingly wanted buildings with integrated systems for energy efficiency, security, and automation. Walker Innovation Solutions was born on paper 6 weeks later. I maxed out my credit cards and took a loan against my car to secure a tiny office space and basic equipment. Dr. Hayes introduced me to potential investors, but most wanted to see proof of concept before committing funds. My first break came through a former classmate whose father owned several small retail spaces. He needed a smart security system integrated during a renovation rather than added afterward. The job was small, but I approached it with the dedication of a major project. I worked 18-hour days, learning as I went, sometimes sleeping on the floor of my office to save time. When the project finished on time and under budget, with systems that outperformed expectations, my client was impressed enough to refer me to 2 business associates. Slowly, Walker Innovation Solutions began to build a reputation for quality, innovation, and reliability. The first year was brutal. I lost 20 pounds from stress and skipped meals. My social life became non-existent. Every dollar earned went back into the company. When a pipe burst in my apartment, flooding my bedroom, I slept on a camping mat in my office for 3 months rather than spend money on repairs or new furniture. The turning point came when I realized I couldn't do everything myself. I needed a team that shared my vision. Jessica Reynolds, a brilliant operations manager who had been overlooked for promotion at her previous company due to office politics, became my first key hire. She brought structure to our chaotic processes and implemented systems that allowed us to scale. Next came Michael Chen, a technological genius who had developed software for building management systems, but lacked the business acumen to market it effectively. Together, we refined his software to become the backbone of our smart building solutions. His innovations gave us a competitive edge that traditional construction companies couldn't match. With a core team in place, we began pitching for larger projects. Our approach was different from traditional construction companies. While they focused on the physical structure first with technology as an afterthought, we designed integrated solutions from the ground up. Every wall, floor, and ceiling was considered not just as a structural element but as a potential component of the building's nervous system. Our breakthrough came with Riverview Medical Plaza, a new outpatient facility that needed state-of-the-art patient monitoring and building management systems. The project was valued at just under $1 million, small for the industry but massive for our fledgling company. We won the contract over established competitors because our integrated approach eliminated the need for multiple contractors and reduced both construction time and long-term maintenance costs. The Riverview project nearly broke us. We worked around the clock, solving problems on the fly, learning painful lessons about supply chains and contractor management. There were nights I sat alone in my office, wondering if I'd made a catastrophic mistake in starting this company. Jessica found me at my desk one morning, having not gone home for 3 days straight, staring blankly at spreadsheets that had begun to blur together. "Ethan," she said firmly, "you can't build a company by destroying yourself. We need your vision, not your martyrdom." Her words struck home. I began to delegate more, to trust my growing team, and to focus on strategy rather than trying to control every detail. This shift not only preserved my sanity but allowed the company to flourish as others brought their expertise to the table. When we completed the Riverview project successfully, it became our calling card. The facilities administrator was so impressed with the final result that he gave testimonials to other healthcare providers in his network. Suddenly, Walker Innovation Solutions was on the radar of larger clients. Our approach to growth was careful and strategic. Rather than taking on every project offered, we selected those that aligned with our strengths and vision. I had learned from watching Mitchell Construction spread itself too thin under Gerald's leadership, chasing revenue at the expense of quality and innovation. We would not make the same mistake. By the end of our second year, we had grown to a team of 28. We moved to larger offices and established a reputation as the go-to company for technology-integrated construction. Each success built upon the last, and the rejection that had once devastated me began to feel like the best thing that could have happened. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was building exactly what I had proposed to modernize Mitchell Construction, the vision my uncle had dismissed as Silicon Valley gimmicks. As we prepared to enter our third year of business, I had no idea that our paths would soon cross again, in a way either of us could have anticipated. Walker Innovation Solutions transformed from a struggling startup to an industry disruptor over the next 3 years. Our team expanded from 28 to over 150 employees. We outgrew our office space twice, eventually taking over an entire floor in a downtown high-rise that we renovated as a showcase of our smart building technology. Clients who visited could experience our innovations firsthand, from lighting that adjusted automatically based on natural light levels to meeting rooms that recognized participants and configured to their preferences. Our success wasn't just about technology. We built a company culture that stood in stark contrast to the hierarchical, tradition-bound environment of firms like Mitchell Construction. At Walker Innovation, ideas could come from anywhere, titles didn't shield people from criticism, and results mattered more than tenure. We celebrated creativity and problem-solving, creating an environment where the best concepts won regardless of who proposed them. Jessica Reynolds, now our Chief Operations Officer, implemented management systems that maximized efficiency without sacrificing innovation. Michael Chin, as Chief Technology Officer, led a team of developers who constantly pushed the boundaries of what was possible in building automation and intelligence. Together, we created a leadership team that complemented each other's strengths and compensated for individual weaknesses. My leadership style evolved through trial and error. I made plenty of mistakes, particularly early on, but I learned to admit them quickly, correct course, and move forward. This transparency earned the respect of our team and stood in stark contrast to Uncle Gerald's authoritarian approach at Mitchell Construction, where mistakes were hidden or blamed on subordinates. As we approached our 5th anniversary, Walker Innovation Solutions had won every major industry award for innovation, sustainability, and project management. Construction Technology magazine featured our proprietary building management system on its cover, calling it the future of commercial construction. Business journals regularly included me in their 30 under 40 lists of promising entrepreneurs. Business Insider ran a profile on the company titled, Building the Future: How Walker Innovation Solutions is Disrupting the Construction Industry. The article detailed our approach without mentioning Mitchell Construction or my family connection. I had deliberately kept that part of my story private, not wanting our success to be framed as a family feud or revenge narrative. We were successful because we were better, not because I had something to prove. By our 5th year, annual revenues surpassed $100 million. We had completed projects in 12 states and were fielding inquiries from international clients. Our team had grown to include specialists in every aspect of smart building technology, from energy management to security systems to environmental controls. We weren't just constructing buildings, we were creating intelligent environments that responded to their occupants and optimized their own performance. Our client roster included tech companies, healthcare systems, and forward-thinking universities. What we lacked were the massive commercial developments that formed the backbone of firms like Mitchell Construction. These projects, often valued at $50 million or more, typically went to established companies with decades of history. Despite our innovation and growing reputation, we were still considered too new, too untested for projects of that scale. I gathered our executive team for a strategic planning retreat to address this challenge. We rented a cabin in the mountains, spending 3 days analyzing our position in the market and planning our next moves. It was Jessica who suggested we focus specifically on high-end commercial developments where technology integration would provide the greatest value differentiation. The problem with traditional construction companies, she explained, showing slides of recent major projects, is that they treat technology as an afterthought, something to be added after the building is complete. This creates inefficiencies, compatibility issues, and higher long-term costs. Michael nodded enthusiastically. Our integrated approach reduces these problems, but we're not communicating that value effectively to the developers who need it most. We identified 10 major developers who specialized in premium commercial properties and created tailored presentations demonstrating how our approach could save them money while delivering superior results. The most promising among them was Westfield Development, known for cutting-edge office complexes and mixed-use properties. As we researched potential targets, I noticed something interesting. Mitchell Construction had been Westfield's primary contractor for their last 6 projects. According to industry gossip, however, their most recent collaboration had experienced significant delays and cost overruns due to complications integrating smart building technology with traditional construction methods. I didn't take any particular pleasure in my uncle's company's struggles, but I couldn't help but see the irony. The very issue I had identified years ago, the one Gerald had dismissed as unimportant, was now causing problems for his biggest client. Westfield will be announcing a new development in Phoenix next quarter, Jessica reported during our final planning session. Estimated value is $60 million for the initial phase. If the rumors about their dissatisfaction with Mitchell are true, this could be our opportunity. We spent the next 2 months preparing our approach. We studied every Westfield project, identified pain points in their current processes, and developed detailed proposals showing how our integrated approach would solve these problems. I reviewed every slide, rehearsed every talking point, and prepared for every possible question. What I didn't prepare for was the personal complication that would arise when worlds I had deliberately kept separate suddenly collided. The announcement of Westfield Development's Phoenix project came sooner than expected. Named Pinnacle Plaza, it would be a mixed-use development featuring premium office space, high-end retail, and luxury condominiums. The estimated budget was $70 million for the first phase alone, with potential follow-on phases that could triple that figure. I instructed our business development team to request a meeting with Westfield's decision-makers. To our surprise, Andrew Barnes, Westfield's CEO, responded personally, inviting us to present our approach at their headquarters. This was unusual. Typically, initial meetings would be with project managers or facilities directors, not the chief executive. He's specifically interested in our technology integration, reported Marcus, our business development director, after speaking with Barnes' assistant. Apparently, they've had issues with their previous contractor in this area. The previous contractor, of course, was Mitchell Construction. I debated whether to disclose my family connection before the meeting but decided against it. This wasn't about my history with Mitchell, it was about Walker Innovation's superior approach to modern construction. My personal background wasn't relevant to our proposal. Our team arrived at Westfield's impressive glass and steel headquarters 15 minutes early. Andrew Barnes greeted us personally, a tall man with silver hair and piercing blue eyes that seemed to evaluate everything they saw. He led us to a conference room where his executive team waited, along with architects and project managers for the Pinnacle Plaza development. Walker Innovation Solutions, Barnes began, taking his seat at the head of the table. Your reputation for technological integration precedes you. We've been impressed by what we've heard, particularly your Riverview Medical Plaza project. Show us why you should be part of Pinnacle Plaza. For the next hour, we presented our vision for a truly integrated approach to the development. Michael demonstrated how our systems would create a seamless experience for occupants, while reducing operational costs. Jessica outlined our project management methodology that would prevent the delays and budget overruns common in complex projects. I tied everything together, showing how our approach aligned perfectly with Westfield's reputation for cutting-edge, premium developments. Throughout the presentation, Barnes asked pointed questions that revealed his deep understanding of both construction and technology. When we finished, he leaned back in his chair with a thoughtful expression. Impressive, he said finally. Very impressive. But you're a young company. Pinnacle Plaza is a significant project with high visibility. What makes you think you can handle something of this scale? I had anticipated this question. Mr. Barnes, every successful company was once improving at larger scales. What matters isn't just past performance but approach, methodology, and vision. We've demonstrated our capabilities on increasingly complex projects, delivering consistently superior results. Pinnacle Plaza would be our largest project to date, yes, but we've been building toward this capability since day one. Barnes studied me for a long moment before nodding. Fair point. Now, there's something else we need to discuss. We've already contracted Mitchell Construction for the structural elements of Pinnacle Plaza. They've been our partner for years, and despite some recent challenges, we value that relationship. What we're considering is bringing Walker Innovation in to handle the technology integration and smart building components, working alongside Mitchell as equal partners. The room suddenly felt too warm. In all our planning, we hadn't anticipated this scenario. Working directly with Mitchell Construction, with Uncle Gerald, would create complications I hadn't prepared for. but showing any hesitation could cost us this opportunity. We've collaborated successfully with traditional construction firms on previous projects, I said smoothly. A partnership approach could actually optimize results, with each company focusing on its core strengths. Barnes seemed satisfied with this answer. Excellent. We'll be holding a joint planning session next month with both companies to determine how this partnership would function. If that goes well, we'll move forward with contracts. As we packed up our presentation materials, Barnes pulled me aside. There's something else, Mr. Walker. We're not just interested in Pinnacle Plaza. We're rethinking our entire approach to development. If this partnership works, it could extend to all our future projects. The implications were enormous. Westfield Development initiated 3 to 4 major projects annually, each valued at $50 million or more. Becoming their preferred technology partner would transform Walker Innovation Solutions overnight. On the flight home, while the rest of the team celebrated, I sat quietly by the window, contemplating the collision course I had inadvertently set. In 4 weeks, I would be sitting across from Uncle Gerald in a professional capacity for the first time since he'd rejected my application. He would discover that the nephew he deemed unqualified was now being brought in as an equal partner by his most important client. More concerning was a clause in Westfield's standard contracts that I'd studied during our preparation. It gave them the right to consolidate under a single contractor if partnership arrangements proved problematic. This meant that either Mitchell Construction or Walker Innovation could potentially end up controlling the entire project if the other failed to perform adequately. The perfect opportunity had arrived, but it came with complications I never could have anticipated. As the plane descended toward home, I realized that years of careful separation between my new life and my family history were about to collapse. The confrontation I had neither sought nor prepared for was now inevitable. "You seem quiet," Jessica observed as we gathered our belongings. "Having second thoughts about working with Mitchell?" "No," I replied, making my decision. "I'm having first thoughts about how to make sure we outperform them in every measurable way." The Westfield Development headquarters felt different the second time I walked through its doors. The same sleek architecture and premium finishes surrounded us, but now they framed what promised to be the most awkward professional meeting of my life. Andrew Barnes greeted our team in the lobby, shaking hands warmly. "Mitchell's representatives are already in the conference room," he mentioned casually as he led us down the hallway. "They're quite interested to meet the team that impressed us so thoroughly." I had prepared extensively for this moment, rehearsing my responses to potential scenarios. I would be professional, focused solely on the project, giving Gerald no reason to claim I was bringing personal history into a business context. Walker Innovation would stand on its merits alone. Barnes opened the conference room door, and there they sat, Uncle Gerald at the center, flanked by Trevor and several Mitchell Construction executives I didn't recognize. Gerald's expression shifted from polite anticipation to shock as he recognized me, then quickly hardened into something closer to contempt. "Gerald Mitchell, this is Ethan Walker, CEO of Walker Innovation Solutions," Barnes introduced, oblivious to the tension suddenly electrifying the room. Gerald stood stiffly, extending his hand across the table. "Mr. Walker," he said formally, as if we were strangers. "This is unexpected." "Mr. Mitchell," I replied, matching his tone as we shook hands briefly. "I look forward to collaborating on this project." Trevor stared openly, his surprise less disguised than his father's. "You two know each other?" Barnes asked, picking up on the undercurrent. Before Gerald could respond with some dismissive explanation, I answered directly. "Mr. Mitchell is my uncle. I grew up around the construction industry thanks to my family's business." I kept my tone light, informational rather than accusatory. "Well," Barnes said, eyebrows raised, "that's quite a coincidence. Perhaps this partnership is meant to be, then. Family businesses coming together." Gerald cleared his throat. "Walker Innovation is hardly a family business, Andrew. And coincidences aside, we should focus on the project requirements." The meeting proceeded with presentations from both companies about their approaches to the Pinnacle Plaza development. When Mitchell Construction outlined their construction methodology, I noticed it had barely evolved since my childhood visits to the office. Their timeline allocated minimal consideration for technology integration, treating it as an afterthought to be addressed after the main structure was complete. When it was our turn, Michael Chin demonstrated how our approach would require collaboration from the foundation stage forward, with conduits, access points, and infrastructure elements designed specifically to accommodate the smart systems. The contrast between the two approaches was stark. "This is unnecessarily complicated," Trevor interrupted during Michael's explanation of our integrated security systems. "We've completed dozens of buildings without all these special considerations. You're creating problems where none exist." Michael began to respond, but I gently took over. "Actually, we're preventing problems before they arise. Retrofitting smart systems into traditionally constructed buildings typically increases costs by 20 to 30% and extends timelines significantly. Building with these systems in mind from the beginning creates efficiencies that benefit everyone involved, especially the client." I directed this last comment to Barnes, who nodded appreciatively. Several of Westfield's project managers were taking detailed notes. As the meeting progressed, the division in approaches became increasingly apparent. Mitchell Construction represented tradition, reliability, and established methods. Walker Innovation offered innovation, efficiency, and forward-thinking solutions. The Westfield team seemed to recognize the value in both. During a break, I stepped out to take a call from a client. When I returned, I overheard Trevor speaking to Barnes in the hallway. "Nepotism gets people far these days," Trevor was saying. "Some startups will hire anyone with the right connections." Barnes looked uncomfortable. "I assure you, Trevor, we selected Walker Innovation based solely on their expertise and approach. Their team's qualifications are exceptional." The initial planning session concluded with agreements to share detailed specifications and reconvene in 2 weeks with integrated proposals. As everyone gathered their materials, Gerald approached me directly for the first time. "Quite the coincidence, your company being selected," he said quietly. "I wonder what strings were pulled to make that happen." I met his gaze steadily. "The same strings that got me rejected from Mitchell Construction, I imagine." "None at all. Just merit and performance." Gerald's jaw tightened, but Barnes called him away before he could respond. As our teams filed out separately, the lines were clearly drawn. This would not be a harmonious partnership. Over the next month, the challenges of collaboration became increasingly apparent. Mitchell Construction consistently delayed providing specifications needed for our technology planning. When information was shared, it often changed without notice. Trevor, now Mitchell's project lead for Pinnacle Plaza, scheduled critical meetings with minimal notice, then criticized our team for being unprepared. During joint presentations to Westfield, Gerald repeatedly undermined our recommendations, suggesting they were unnecessary complications that would increase costs and delays. I maintained professional composure throughout, addressing each concern with data and examples rather than emotion. 6 weeks into the planning phase, we received an email from Andrew Barnes requesting an urgent meeting with both companies. His tone suggested frustration, and Jessica speculated that he might be reconsidering the partnership approach altogether. When we arrived at Westfield headquarters, the tension in the room was palpable. Barnes sat at the head of the table, flanked by his legal counsel and chief financial officer, both wearing equally serious expressions. "Gentlemen," Barnes began once everyone was seated, "we have a problem. Pinnacle Plaza is already behind schedule, and we haven't even broken ground. The conflicts between your approaches are creating delays that will impact our timeline and budget." Gerald leaned forward. "Andrew, as I've been saying from the beginning, trying to integrate all this technology is overly complicated. If you let Mitchell Construction take the lead as we've done successfully for years, we can get this project back on track immediately." "Actually," Barnes replied, "our analysis suggests the opposite. The delays are primarily occurring because traditional construction methods are being forced to accommodate technology requirements retroactively, rather than integrating them from the start as Walker Innovation has proposed. He slid folders across the table to both Gerald and me. We've prepared an analysis of the planning phase to date, including responsibility for delays and communication failures. The results are quite illuminating. I opened my folder to find a detailed report showing that Mitchell Construction was responsible for over 70% of the delays, primarily due to resistance to adaptation and failure to provide timely information. Gerald's face flushed as he read through his copy. This is absurd. We've been Westfield's trusted partner for 15 years. You're going to take the word of an unproven startup over our established record? We're taking the word of data, Gerald, Barnes replied evenly. And our contract gives us options in this situation. The room fell silent as the implication hung in the air. Westfield could consolidate the entire project under a single contractor if the partnership proved unworkable. Barnes turned to me. Mr. Walker, given these circumstances, what would you recommend? This was the moment I never expected to have. The power to potentially remove Mitchell Construction from their largest client's project. The professional vindication that would come from Westfield choosing Walker Innovation over my uncle's company. Mr. Barnes, I said carefully, the data shows clear incompatibilities in our approaches. In my professional opinion, Pinnacle Plaza would benefit from a unified vision rather than a forced partnership between fundamentally different methodologies. Gerald interrupted sharply. This is ridiculous. You can't possibly be considering giving control of a $70 million project to a 5-year-old company with no experience at this scale. Barnes held up his hand. Gerald, please. I'd like to hear Mr. Walker's complete recommendation. All eyes turned to me. I could feel Gerald's glare, could sense the career-defining moment at hand. The temptation to simply recommend Walker Innovation take over was powerful. Instead, I closed my folder deliberately. The contract could be consolidated, yes. But I believe there's a third option that better serves Westfield's interests. Mitchell Construction has decades of experience with structural elements that shouldn't be discounted. What's needed isn't elimination but reorganization. I outlined a proposal where Walker Innovation would lead the overall project, with Mitchell Construction functioning as a subcontractor for traditional structural components. This would maintain their involvement while resolving the hierarchy issues that had caused delays. As I finished, Gerald's expression had transformed from anger to disbelief. He suddenly realized that I literally held contractual power over his company's future with their largest client. You're not qualified, he muttered, almost to himself, echoing his rejection from years before. Actually, Barnes interjected, Mr. Walker appears to be uniquely qualified for exactly this situation. His recommendation shows both expertise and maturity. He turned to Gerald. You have a choice, Gerald. Accept the restructured arrangement, or Mitchell Construction can withdraw from the project entirely. We'll need your decision by tomorrow morning. The meeting adjourned shortly after, with Gerald and his team departing without another word. As we gathered our materials, Barnes approached me privately. I had no idea about your family connection when we selected your company, he said. I hope that didn't put you in an uncomfortable position. Business is business, I replied. Family is family. Sometimes they intersect in unexpected ways. Barnes nodded thoughtfully. Your recommendation surprised me. Many would have seized the opportunity to eliminate a competitor, especially one with personal complications. Eliminating Mitchell Construction wouldn't serve your interests, I said honestly. And despite everything, I still respect what my grandfather built. As we left the building, Jessica gave me a questioning look. You could have taken the entire contract, she said. Why didn't you? Because this isn't about revenge, I answered, watching Gerald's car pull away from the curb. It's about proving who's truly qualified. The evening after the Westfield meeting, my phone rang continuously. First my father, then my mother, then even Grandpa Sam himself. Word had spread quickly through the family. Uncle Gerald had called an emergency meeting at the Mitchell family home and requested everyone's presence, including mine. You don't have to go, my mother said when I called her back. After how they treated you, no one would blame you for staying away. I'll be there, I replied. This confrontation had been 5 years in the making. I wouldn't miss it. When I arrived at Grandpa Sam's sprawling craftsman-style home, the same house where we'd had countless family dinners, the atmosphere was tense. Uncle Gerald's car was already in the driveway, along with my parents' sedan and several others I recognized as belonging to Mitchell Construction Board members. Grandpa Sam answered the door himself, his weathered face breaking into a genuine smile. "Ethan," he said, pulling me into a hug. "It's been too long, son." He led me to the living room where everyone had gathered. Uncle Gerald stood by the fireplace, his posture rigid. Trevor sat nearby, studiously avoiding eye contact. My father nodded to me from across the room, a complex mix of emotions on his face. "Now that everyone's here," Gerald began without preamble, "we need to address the situation with Westfield Development. For those who don't know, Mitchell Construction is at risk of losing our largest client because of competing interests." All eyes turned to me, and I felt a momentary flash of sympathy for Gerald. This was his worst nightmare, having to admit vulnerability in front of the family and board. "What Gerald means," I said, breaking the uncomfortable silence, "is that Westfield has concerns about Mitchell Construction's approach to technology integration on the Pinnacle Plaza project. They've proposed a restructuring of responsibilities. A restructuring that would put my nephew's upstart company in charge of our largest contract," Gerald added bitterly. "A contract worth $70 million. Grandpa Sam's eyebrows shot up. "Your company, Ethan? The one you started after?" He trailed off, looking uncertainly between Gerald and me. "After I was rejected from Mitchell Construction for being unqualified," I finished for him. "Yes, Walker Innovation Solutions. We specialize in smart building technology, the same technology one wanted to bring to Mitchell 5 years ago." My father stood up. "Perhaps we should all take a step back and look at this objectively. Ethan, what exactly is Westfield proposing?" I explained the situation as neutrally as possible, outlining Westfield's concerns about the partnership and their options under the contract. I described my recommendation for restructuring rather than elimination, emphasizing that it would keep Mitchell Construction involved in a substantial way. "You could have pushed us out entirely," one of the board members observed. "I could have," I acknowledged. "But that's not what's best for the project or, frankly, for either of our companies in the long run." Gerald scoffed. "How magnanimous of you. Meanwhile, Mitchell Construction would be reduced to a subcontractor on a project we've been developing for 2 years. "Gerald," my father interjected sharply, "considering the alternative is losing the contract entirely, perhaps some gratitude would be appropriate." "Gratitude?" Gerald's voice rose. "For being humiliated by my own nephew? For having our company's reputation undermined?" Grandpa Sam, who had been listening silently, finally spoke. "I think I need to understand how we got here. Gerald, you told me Ethan wasn't interested in joining the family business. Now I learn you rejected his application and told him he wasn't qualified?" The room fell silent. Gerald shifted uncomfortably. "Samuel, business decisions can't be based on family sentiment. Mitchell Construction needs the best talent available. And you determined that my grandson, with his business degree, MBA, and internship experience, wasn't qualified?" Grandpa's voice had an edge I'd rarely heard. "While Trevor, straight out of college with barely passing grades, was made director of business development?" Trevor looked like he wanted to disappear into the sofa cushions. "The decisions I've made have always been in the best interest of Mitchell Construction," Gerald insisted. "Have they?" my father challenged. "Our technology integration has fallen behind industry standards. We've lost 3 major contracts in the past year to more innovative competitors. The Westfield situation is just the most visible symptom of a larger problem." What followed was 2 hours of intense discussion, during which years of suppressed conflicts and frustrations emerged. Board members revealed concerns they'd been hesitant to voice. My father presented examples of opportunities missed due to resistance to change. Through it all, Grandpa Sam listened, his expression growing increasingly troubled. Finally, he stood up, commanding the room's attention. "I built Mitchell Construction from nothing," he said quietly. "Not for personal glory, not for power, but to create something of value that would support our family for generations. What I'm hearing tonight suggests we've lost sight of that purpose." He turned to Gerald. "You've led the company for 15 years, and there have been successes. But leadership isn't about maintaining control, it's about recognizing when change is needed." Then he looked at me. "And you, Ethan? You've proven your abilities by building your own successful company. That took courage and vision. But family businesses are about more than business. They're about family." Grandpa proposed a solution that surprised everyone. Restructuring Mitchell Construction's leadership. My father would be reinstated as co-CEO alongside Gerald, with equal authority. The board would be expanded to include new members with technology expertise. And most surprisingly, he suggested a strategic partnership between Mitchell Construction and Walker Innovation Solutions, independent of the Westfield project. "We need to modernize," he stated simply. "Ethan has built exactly what Mitchell Construction needs. Instead of competing, we should be collaborating." Gerald initially resisted, but the board members present made it clear they supported the changes. Faced with potentially losing his position entirely, he reluctantly agreed to the new arrangement. As the meeting concluded, Trevor approached me somewhat sheepishly. "That software system your company developed for project management, it's actually pretty impressive. Maybe you could show me how it works sometime." It was a small olive branch, but I accepted it for what it was. "Sure, Trevor. Anytime." Outside, as people were leaving, my father embraced me tightly. "I'm proud of you, son. Not just for your success, but for how you handled this situation. You could have sought revenge, but you chose a better path." "I learned from watching you, Dad," I replied. "You never let bitterness define you, even when you had every right to be angry." In the weeks that followed, Mitchell Construction accepted the restructured arrangement with Westfield. The Pinnacle Plaza project proceeded with Walker Innovation Solutions leading the technology integration and overall project management, while Mitchell Construction handled the structural elements they excelled at. The strategic partnership between our companies developed more slowly, with understandable caution on both sides. My father's return to leadership helped bridge the gap, facilitating communication and collaboration that would have been impossible before. Uncle Gerald remained somewhat distant, but as the benefits of our collaboration became increasingly apparent in both companies' performance and profitability, his resistance gradually diminished. Over time, our professional relationship developed a cautious respect, if not warmth. Grandpa Sam became a regular visitor to Walker Innovation's offices, fascinated by the technology we were developing. "This is what construction will be in the future," he declared after one demonstration. "I'm just glad Mitchell Construction won't be left behind." The Pinnacle Plaza project was completed 3 months ahead of schedule and 5% under budget, setting new standards for both companies. Andrew Barnes was so impressed that Westfield Development signed long-term contracts with both Mitchell Construction and Walker Innovation Solutions for their next 5 years of projects. On the day we celebrated the grand opening of Pinnacle Plaza, standing amid the gleaming glass and steel structure with its seamlessly integrated smart systems, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. The rejection that had once devastated me had ultimately led to greater success than I could have achieved within the constraints of Mitchell Construction. Life rarely follows the path we expect. Sometimes the worst moments, the painful rejections and closed doors, force us to find new routes to our destinations. I had wanted to join my family's legacy but ended up creating my own while ultimately strengthening theirs as well. If you're facing rejection or obstacles in your own journey, remember that setbacks often lead to unexpected opportunities. The question isn't whether you'll face challenges, but how you'll respond to them. Will you let rejection define you, or will you use it as fuel to build something even better? I'd love to hear about times when rejection led you to unexpected success. Drop a comment below sharing your story. And if you found value in mine, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel for more real-life business lessons, and share this video with someone who might need encouragement today. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even, but getting better. Thanks for watching, and remember, qualification isn't determined by others, but by what you build yourself.